Exploring the bizarre. Your e-ticket ride into the world of the paranormal. Strap yourself in as we traverse the universe exploring the unexplained. UFOs, ghosts, lost worlds, cryptozoology, as well as other dimensions. It's time to take back the night. Now, your electrifying hosts of Exploring the Bizarre, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Well, where's my noisemaker? Can't find my... Oh, well, 148, 149, 150. Well, it's true, Tim. We've made it to 150 episodes.
I predicted we would. I'm psychic.
So, Tim, what's going on over there in Jasper, Indiana? That town of how many thousands of people live in Jasper?
Oh, not that many. probably about 12,000.
Oh, I thought it was a huge city. No skyscrapers?
No skyscrapers. The population increases during the daytime because it's a pretty large manufacturing hub in southern Indiana. But the general population.
What do you manufacture there?
Oh, mostly wood products. Master Brand Cabinets is the world's largest kitchen cabinet maker, and it's centered here in Jasper. And then you have like Kimball International, which does a lot of office furnitures as well as various kinds of electronics. And that's just that's a couple of the big international companies that are here.
Well, I hope they send me over a kitchen cabinet, except I don't have a kitchen.
Well, Tim, they could custom make one for your kitchen.
Well, they would have to do it in somebody else's apartment because with all these books and files and stuff here, there's no room. I gave up my kitchen for a life of ufology many years ago, Tim. But anyway, why don't you tell us what we're going to be discussing this evening? I'm sure our listeners out there are more interested in our guests than they are in us. And I can tell that because the donations have not been coming in like I had planned. And if everybody could please send us $10 or $20 or $30, we would appreciate it. It will go to a good cause. All right, guys, bring the keg of liquor and put it over there.
There you go. That's a great cause.
That's a great cause. Yeah. Well, I guess people know me too. Well, go ahead, Tim. Shoot the works. Go for the sky.
Go for the sky. Well, we've got two fantastic guests tonight, and I'm really excited that we finally managed to get them here tonight, because I know that, especially with Denise, we've gone back and forth a couple of times trying to get dates set up. But our guests tonight are Denise Siegel and Brian Rosenquist. Did I pronounce that right, Brian? And we'll start with Denise here. Now, Denise has been a professional psychic for 30 years and learned astrology while working as a psychic. She learned astrology from colleagues. And now, early on in her career...
I was on mute. I muted myself.
Oh, that's all right. I was just wanting to make sure that I pronounced your last name correctly. Rosenquist?
You got it, yep.
All right. Well, let me continue on about Denise here. Now, let's say early on in Denise's career, she was named Best Psychic by the LA Weekly, and she's appeared on Coast to Coast and REN TV. Her blog, Astrology and Psychic Predictions, was launched in 2008 and has had hundreds of thousands of views every year since its inception. She's had a growing YouTube presence and has written 2 books. A novel, Trees for the Forest, is based on a series of visions that she had in the late 1990s. And recently she wrote the ebook Astrology of Donald Trump and the Fate of His Presidency. Ooh, that sounds like a fascinating one. Now, both books can be found on Smashwords, Amazon, and any online book retailer. Now, as well, Denise, she moved from Los Angeles to the Nashville area, and she looked for the local MUFON chapter, but found that there wasn't one. So she started one in Middle Tennessee with the aid of the late Eddie Middleton and his assistant director in East Tennessee. So now, besides being a psychic astrologer, Denise is an accomplished visual artist, musician, songwriter, and writer. So now we'll go on to Brian Rosenquist. So now Brian is a filmmaker, animator, a stereoscopic 3D photographer, writer, and special FX artist. For the last year, Brian has been filming and editing original stereoscopic 3D video footage for Drive and Neon Demon director Nicholas Winding. Let's see, how do I pronounce this? Refs, REFNS, new website project, bynwr.com, all which is available to view for free. Brian has also been working for several years on a documentary feature about the series of Christian exploitation films made by the prolific exploitation film director Ron Orman. And Baptist preacher Estes Perkle, that's a good name, in the 1970s. Now, Brian is also the creator of a variety of beloved cartoon characters from the Emmy Award-winning PBS Kids show Biz Kids, including Hover Puppy, a character that was later ripped off by the creators of Cartoon Network's Steven Universe. So now Brian says he harbors absolutely no animosity towards them, though. None whatsoever. Brian has somehow managed to juggle all these things while also holding down a J-Job with Color by Deluxe for more than 10 years. So Brian, Denise, thank you very much for being with us tonight on Exploring the Bizarre.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
It's great to be here.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Hey, I think, Tim, we should mention the fact that it was due to Brian that we had the Barushka lady on a couple of weeks ago.
Yes, the Babushka lady. That was a fascinating interview.
And it's been one of our top-rated shows since the broadcast, and a lot of comments. And, I read stuff on the internet. I don't spend all day doing it, but somebody's sending out a posting about 5 of the greatest unsolved mysteries of all time, and one of them was, who is that lady with the scarf on her head in the grassy knoll? Like, why don't you tune into the program and find out? I mean, it's public knowledge now. All you got to do is listen to the episode. But Brian, I actually met you a couple months ago, and we had a nice time together. And I thought, geez, we've got to sit down and discuss some of the things that you're into. You seem to have quite a bit of knowledge. Now, you're basically, would you consider yourself a filmmaker? Is that you've worked on a lot of film projects, right?
Well, yeah, I am a filmmaker, but I've got a day job. I'm not paying the bills with making films yet. But
you will after this show.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, what did you tell us a little bit about your background? I know you are working on a project now, and I'm familiar with the somewhat with that about discussing Mr. the Orman brothers, right? But why don't you go? Yeah,
no,
back
not
to
brothers,
the beginning
just
of your
Ron
film
Orman.
career. Oh, there's only one Orman? I thought there were two.
His wife, June, they were kind of a team. They made all the movies together. June was in charge of distribution.
I always thought, for some reason, I always thought it was his brother. Well, how stupid of me! But a couple of things. I remember reading articles that I believe. Well, what is Mr. Orman's name? Is he still with us?
Ron Orman, no, he passed away in 1981. His son is still alive. June Ormond lived I think until 2006. She was in her mid-90s. Ron Ormond, he actually started out in vaudeville. He and his wife were kind of a vaudeville team for a while, and then they got into filmmaking because they were friends with all these vaudeville performers, and they just started filming them doing their shows. And it was cheaper than sending everybody out on tour because they could just send film prints out. And that's how they got into. They made really cheap westerns to start with.
Who were some of the the people that they filmed? Anybody that we would have known?
Well, yeah, they made a few films with Tex Ritter. They made a few films with Lash. Those were some of the Western actors who they were.
Well, now, you know, when I first heard of him, he used to be a contributor to Ray Palmer's magazines. And, of course, Ray Palmer had started out as an editor of Amazing Stories. And later on, he became a co-publisher of Fate magazine and was probably best known for the Shaver mystery. And then when Kenneth Arnold had his first UFO sighting near Mount Rainier, Palmer hired him to investigate another case in that area where a UFO supposedly crash landed over Maury Island. And so anyway, that was the beginning of this all. Is that like I say, I do know that he contributed to Ray Palmer's publication. Do you know?
Ron
Ormond,
Ron Ormond. He became, for some reason, he had the title the West Coast editor, and I don't know. You know, I guess just because he was editing his own material on the. I'm not sure why he got that title, but he was editing a bit of material, but I don't think he was editing very much. But he while he was making these really cheap westerns and exploitation movies, he was doing all kinds of other things. He was a pilot, and he was also interested in all mysteries. You know, he was interested in flying saucers. He was interested in Eastern mysticism. He and a friend of his, a hypnotist, Ormond McGill, went through Asia studying Asian mysticism and Asian just magic practices, and they shot a bunch of film while they were there. That was a big interest of his, and it kind of tied into later on. He got involved with people like Reinhold Schmidt, and it was out of that interest.
Now, I remember you sent me an article, which I guess I had really originally read like 20 years ago or something. He interviewed, now correct me as we go along here, he interviewed a prospector, kind of a hermit type guy, who apparently had seen a UFO either crash or land, and some beings came out of the craft.
That's right. Yeah, he was. He got. I think he just got really hooked at one point. He had dinner with Kenneth Arnold, and it sort of set him off. And because he was a pilot, he could fly from town to town. So he was, for a little while, flying from airport to airport, asking people about flying saucers if they'd seen them. And people were just looking at him cockeyed. And then he wound up somewhere in Arizona, I think. And somebody goes, "Well, yeah, I know somebody who's seen a little green man." So he got hooked up with this prospector who claimed that he had frequently seen flying saucers over this one spot, and for whatever reason, he thought maybe I should go dig for gold in that spot. And he dug around in there, and he found this kind of a cave, and inside the cave, he found two kind of mummified beings, these little green men. He took one of them back with him and left the other one in the cave because he thought if flying saucer people had buried these beings down here, then he would really only piss them off 50% if he took one of them rather than, he would really piss them off if he took both of them. That was the prospector's idea, I guess. Anyway, so Ron Ormond ends up meeting this guy, and the guy just gave him this little green man, and it was a mummified humanoid with an oversized head and kind of big eyes, according to Ron Ormond, it looked like. Are you familiar with the Robert Gardner photo where you see a really short person standing between two unidentified men? According to Ron Ormond,
the supposed FBI photo, but I think it was actually doctored and up
It
in
absolutely
Germany.
is doctored. Yep, because I've seen the originals.
Yeah.
But Ron Ormond said that that this little green man that he had looked very much like what was in that photo.
Like a shaved monkey or something almost.
Kind of, yeah. It's got a weird face. In that photo, it didn't seem to have a nose or a mouth. It had this weird sort of pinched face or something. But yeah, that was a hoax photo. I've seen the originals of that. Anyway, so Ron Ormond brought this little green man back with him. At that time, he was living in Hollywood, and he would go around to flying saucer conventions like at Giant Rock and show off this little green man that he had. There are no photos of him with the little green man, but there's a photo of him carrying the box with the little green man.
Well, that's proof. That's proof.
Absolutely right. Now, Tim Ormond has seen it. I mean, he grew up with the little green man in his dad's office, so he told me that it's absolutely true. His dad had it. Bunch of their stuff got destroyed in a flood, so including the little green man, apparently.
Okay, so now I also had in my collection actually some very bad copies of some apocalyptic type Christian movies. I know that's the way the Horseman of the Apocalypse or something. Well, how did he go from UFOs to this deep fundamentalism?
Well, it was a kind of long process. They were working on some film about Ron and June Ormond announced that they were going to make a movie about the contactees, and they were going to have all these people in it. You know, Adamski and Van Tassel and Reinhold Schmidt and
Orfeo Angelucci, probably
all of them. Yeah. Ray and Rex Stanford. Now, I've asked Ray Stanford, and he said no, he was never asked to be in this movie. They went around collecting money to make this movie that kept changing titles. It was going to be Crusade to New Horizons, and then it was going to be Project Outer Space, and then it was going to be The Real Flying Saucer Story. And they had people donate $1 here, $1 here at all these conventions. So they made the budget that way, $10,000, $15,000. And
before
then
GoFundMe, right? Yeah, no GoFundMe in those days.
But, and then I don't know. In an interview, June Ormond claimed that Ron Ormond began to kind of doubt the validity of Reinhold Schmidt's story, and they decided after they'd already made the Reinhold Schmidt film. They'd already directed a film based on Reinhold Schmidt's story. I
had a copy of that.
Yeah, I just recently saw it. June Ormond had a copy that she gave to somebody, and he dug it out for me, and it's a terrible movie.
Well, I mean, come on. What was their budget on it? $2,000? No, $7,000. I heard
it was $10,000 that Reinhold Schmidt covered. So he owned the movie, and one of the reasons that you don't find it anymore is because it somehow came into the ownership of an Oregon mining company.
I got my copy, I think, from Dan Fry's ex-wife, who I think later married Frank Stranges.
She was friends with June Ormond.
Well, there you go. See, my memory goes back but I can't find my house keys. I mean, I can remember all this UFO trivia nut. That's what I am. But okay, so tell us. He did make movies.
They announced this movie that they never made. And June Ormond claims that they gave all the money back, but it's not possible. They could not have returned every single dollar to the thousands of people who saw it. I think they made some money off of the contactee scene and then walked away.
Much more money in Christianity.
Well, that came later. So what happened was they decided to leave Hollywood. They moved to Nashville, and they set up a production company there in Nashville where they made movies for 10 years. And they were making movies like Please Don't Touch Me and 40 Acre Feud and White Lightning Road, Girl from Tobacco Row. They had made this movie, Girl from Tobacco Row, and they were flying to a premiere because Ron Ormond was a pilot. And their son, Tim Ormond, who was 16 or 17 at that time, was his co-pilot. and they got about 100 feet up, and the engine stalled, and they were all certain they were going to die. The plane started to come down. There was just no. What happened was there was no oil in the engine, so they were coming down at a bad angle, and they were certain there was no way they were going to survive. And then June Ormond, who was an amazing woman, she was also very colorful. She, while the plane was going down in the seconds that it took for it to, fall 100 feet, she had a conversation, she says, with an angel that was sitting on the wing of the plane.
Whoa, that's kind of like a Bill Shatner thing where he looks out the window.
Yeah, very strange.
Yeah.
A very kind of esoteric conversation about like what is eternity and what is the distance of eternity, anyway, I'll follow up when we get back.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, we're ready to cut out for our first break. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. The angel on the wing of KCRR Studios is calling us, saying that it's time to go to our first break of the evening. So when we come back, we will continue our conversation and we'll bring Denise Siegel into the program. So stay tuned for more Exploring the Bizarre.
Now back to Exploring the Bizarre with two of the most electrifying researchers in the paranormal. Your hosts, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
And we're back with more Exploring the Bizarre. And I just want to remind everyone that if you have questions for our guest or for Tim Buckley or myself, please feel free to let us know. Go into the chat room. You can Skype us, text us, all kinds of different ways. We just love hearing from you. So, Tim, let's bring Denise into the conversation now. Denise, really happy to have you with us on Exploring the Bizarre. Now, I'll have to admit that I first discovered you by seeing your videos on YouTube. Yeah.
A lot of people find me. Yeah, that's a recent thing, and it seems like that's how a lot of people have found me. So I think that was a wise move on my part to start doing that.
When did you start putting up things on YouTube?
About a year ago, a little over a year ago, like in the spring of last year, right about a couple months after Donald Trump became president. I started kind of doing some astrology research on him. I mean, I know depending on where you're at, but I was personally kind of freaked out a little bit by Donald Trump, and I think a lot of people were. So I just started, trying to figure out what was going to happen with him, and I just felt like it was something that needed to be shared. And then it seemed like it caught on pretty quickly. I mean, I think that first video ended up getting, I haven't looked recently, but it got tens of thousands of views.
Wow.
So, and then I just kept just putting up more information whenever I would kind of discover or dig in and try to do some research. And eventually I got so deep into it that I just felt like it was getting confusing. There's so many players with him. There's so many different people that were coming and going, that I ended up just feeling like I should just write this down and put it in a book, because it was like, I just had handfuls of charts and just trying to figure the whole thing out. It's a pretty crazy period of time, as you know, and just trying to figure out, why it happened and kind of how it happened, and sort of what was actually going to be the final outcome of it, because it just seems like, it's sort of plunged our whole country into sort of a tailspin, I think, in a lot of ways. We went from really, it was like very reactive to, it seems like to me, to Barack Obama's, administration. It seems like this is sort of, although of course he wasn't really elected by the popular vote, it's still sort of a kind of a shadow kind of current that was sort of running through the Barack Obama presidency and sort of kind of came to light, I think, with Donald Trump, in my opinion. And I think it has a lot to do with what we're, as a whole world, are going through its Neptune transit in Pisces. And Neptune and Pisces is sort of people clinging to their beliefs and being easily deluded and confused, and sort of a lot of magical thinking and just a lot of confusion and sort of stuff happening, in the shadows. And yeah, so that sort of Donald Trump himself is a really Uranian character. He's got Sun conjunct Uranus, and everyone around him, all of his cabinet members, everyone that was close to him, Hope Hicks and all these other people that, were characters in his administration and are still around him, all have really strong Uranian aspects to their chart. And that basically means Uranus rules sort of revolutionary kind of, and it's sort of erratic behavior and kind of people that you change on a dime. And it just seemed to me like there was a little bit of a coup going on, with the Russians and his whole thing. And, it just seemed like there needed to be some delineation that was kind of coming out of that, some kind of clarity, because I felt like there was a lot of confusion. I noticed there were people that were in the beginning saying that he was going to be assassinated. There was all kinds of weird stuff floating around the internet, different psychics putting their predictions up, but I just felt like everything was so, I just didn't think any of that was going to happen. So I just figured I should just start doing that. That's how that came about. So,
well, let's go back and in your biography, you said that you'd been a professional psychic for a number of years. I mean,
yes.
was this something that you knew when you were a kid? Because we've talked to a lot of people who they'll say when I was a kid, I could tell when Grandma Smith was going to pass away, or things like that. Is it like that with you?
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I had a lot of really kind of intense psychic experiences as a kid. Actually, my father died when I was a little kid, and so I knew about 3 years before he was going to die. I knew the time and the place he was going to die. I knew a lot of stuff that it was kind of freaky, and I think I scared a lot of the adults in my life because I knew a lot of stuff that I shouldn't have known. So yeah, I knew pretty early on that there was something kind of weird about me. And actually it kind of came to a head when I was like 12, 13, sort of going through puberty. There was a lot of, I guess, sort of poltergeist kind of experiences, a lot of weird stuff going on in my house and strange kind of occurrences. And it all kind of culminated in, it was kind of scary. It was kind of a scary period of time because there was so much, paranormal activity in my house and just my friends kind of being sucked into it, that I actually kind of started being called a witch at school and stuff like that. I was very stigmatized by it, but it was fine. I lost a lot of friends, but that's part of being a psychic thing. I think a lot of people were psychic and it's sort of uncontrolled when you're younger. I didn't know how to turn it off, so it was almost like being out of sync with time. Like I kind of always knew what was going to happen. Sometimes I would answer the phone before it rang, answer people's questions, know things about them that they didn't tell me. So it wasn't really a very comfortable experience for a lot of people to deal with me very much. So when I got older, my first thing to do was really to sort of train that and kind of make sure that I could get it under control, because it kind of felt to me like, as I kind of dug into it, I started feeling like sometimes that, I don't know if you've ever seen this happen, but if you've ever been on the street and you've seen a schizophrenic person and they just randomly start telling you things about yourself that they could never know, I kind of realized that there's sort of like a weird line between psychics and schizophrenics.
Oh, yeah.
And I was really afraid I was going to cross that line at a certain point in my life. And so I kind of pulled myself back from the precipice of that. And then I dug in and started sort of training it and kind of learning to turn it off and kind of control it and get it.
Now, how do you do that? How do you train yourself?
Well,
there's not a college course out there for, for that.
No, there's not.
Online manuals.
No. And especially back then, at first I started kind of meditating. I started meditating probably around like 12 or 13. I found a book on TM, which probably wasn't really good. It probably made it worse for a little while because I was kind of young and I didn't really know what I was doing. And then I just started reading books and kind of that kind of brought me to Wicca. So I got involved in a coven when I was in college, and it was a Celtic-based coven, and I trained under a priestess, and then I got involved in ceremonial magic as well, and I trained with a ceremonial magician. So I did a lot of, at the time it was sort of, I went old school rather than new age because that was sort of what was available. And also I felt like it had a deeper roots kind of system than some of the new age kind of stuff that I was reading. I felt like it was kind of a little fluffy, and I really wanted to know kind of, so that's how I train myself really. And that's kind of where my training is sort of that. And then I, use the tarot, and that kind of focused you. And then I learned astrology, and all those tools kind of give it a place to kind of focus so that you're not just picking stuff up and then just years of writing in journals and trying to figure out the symbols that you kind of get when different things happen, or writing dreams down and all that stuff. Just sort of a lot of introspection and kind of sorting through your stuff, what's psychological, what's spiritual, and what's, not you, and what's you. What
Hey, Denise, what era was that you got into Wiccan? I mean, about what years?
It was on 1985 till in the 80s, and then I was studying ceremonial magic in the 90s, early 90s. So yeah.
Because
so
I was, for me anyway, the Wicca, the witchcraft thing, kind of started, I guess, in the towards the late 60s here in New York. I mean, there was quite a bit of activity. We had our own New York School of Occult Arts and Sciences. We did some Wicca type of thing, but there was the Warlock Shop, and there were a couple other the Process Church, which nobody knew.
Did you ever meet Simon? Did you see who he was at the time?
So, Simon, yes. Now, it was kind of hard to. Well, Simon, that was the Necronomicon, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I hate to tell you. Well, that's another story. It's bogus.
It is.
Well,
no, I know the Necronomicon is. I meant,
Yes.
Was Simon Peter Levenda?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, not as far as I know. No, his Simon is actually. I think his last name was Barnes, but I can't remember exactly. He also was responsible for faking a what would you call it? The alien autopsy alien. Well, he had an alien that was supposed to be found under the Empire State Building, and it was on the cover of official UFO magazine, and people thought it was real. Well, I saw it when he brought it into the to the office there at the Countrywide, and no, I wouldn't accept anything as being legitimate. But the book is still on sale. I mean, Necrocon. It's and people still believe it, and that's what it is. But so I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt there. But I mean, there are all kinds of stories and fallacies and things that about things that go bump in the night. So you got to watch out. Now I understand. Yeah, you
also really do.
Yeah. I understand though too, Denise, that you did have some involvement with UFOs.
Yeah. Yes, I did. Actually, I've had a lot of sightings actually, and that's kind of how I got involved in MUFON. Was
I don't think we mentioned that at the beginning.
So I saw the first one I remember really seeing was when I was 10 years old at my birthday, at a birthday party with a bunch of other girls. But I have seen them many times in my life, and I really didn't. I had some missing time experiences and some other sped up time experiences. I didn't really put all of it together as being that they were all sort of in a kind of universe of. They were all high strangeness kind of things, which I really didn't know that much about until I got kind of more involved with other people who told, kind of put it together for me, the missing time stuff and all that stuff. I got a book about that when I was, like, it wasn't Bud Hopkins put the book out. I had been talking about this missing time experience to everyone that I knew because it was so weird. I was with a friend of mine and we were driving from Cal Arts, where I went to school, to her school, which was Pitzer, and it's about an hour and a half drive, and we left around 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Those are such big towns. I don't even know where. Oh, in California.
In California. Yeah.
Right.
Cal Arts is in Valencia, California, and Pitzer is kind of like out sort of towards Riverside County, kind of, I think, but it's not quite there. It's in LA County. It's about an hour and a half from Cal Arts by, if you drive it. But we left around 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It was like late August, and we didn't get there till the sun was setting. And it was really weird. All of a sudden, we were just sort of like in this weird dazed kind of state. And we had like 3 hours of missing time. And my friend was completely freaking out. She was talking about people touching her, and she lost her like mind basically right after this experience and was completely just acting crazy. And we pulled off to the side of the road and had something to eat, and she was just like crawling, like she was just like couldn't keep still and was really upset. And for me, I wasn't really freaked out by it. I mean, I had so many experiences that were so weird my entire life that for me, it was just, it's just one more weird thing. And it wasn't until I was older and trying to figure it out, like a couple years later, it wasn't really that much older, but that somebody gave me that book and I couldn't read it. It was it was freaking me out too much. But I was dragged to a UFO conference. And I met actually Yvonne Smith, who is a researcher who does a lot of, regression stuff, and talked to her about it. And she said, well, can you get your friend in there? And I talked to my friend. My friend was like, there's no way I want to remember that. If I don't remember it, then there's a good reason for that, And I kind of thought about it. I was like, you know what? Maybe she's right about that. So I put it away for a while, and I kept having experiences. So, right before we moved from Los Angeles to Nashville here, I had a bunch of sightings and a bunch of experiences. And one of the things, which I did report to MUFON, one of the things that I reported was a triangular shaped craft that was sort of see-through, that was like over this grocery store in my neighborhood. It was in the middle of the day, and I got a call from MUFON, which is really unusual because I've reported a lot of things to MUFON over the years. They never really call you because they're overwhelmed with cases in California. There's so many sightings there. And he said, you might want to talk to Yvonne Smith, which was really weird because I was thinking I wanted to talk to her before I moved because I didn't know there'd be, what the situation would be here in Nashville in terms of ever trying to do any regression or, I've been thinking like maybe I should find out what really happened during some of these experiences that I know I had, but I don't remember everything about it. And he put me back in touch with her and told me that there was only one other person who had seen that day. And it was also another experiencer, somebody who had a lifelong kind of connection with UFOs and had was in a group with her and all this stuff. So I did some regressions with her before I moved here. And then I moved here and there was no MUFON group here. So that's why I started one, was kind of like to kind of continue on with that, kind of digging into what happened. I mean, for me, it was really not about, I think a lot of the UFO experience is sort of very connected to the shamanic experience. They're very weird experiences. They're very I think they're so bizarre and otherworldly that people can't really process them. And I don't know if we even remember them exactly how they really were because there's no context to put them in. And I think I've had a lot of experiences with other people. And in those experiences, I go back and talk to a couple of these, a lot of these people are some of my friends. And often they either don't really remember, they remember it kind of vaguely, years later, or they remember it, but they've kind of put it in a closet somewhere in their brain and they kind of don't think about it anymore because they usually have only had like maybe one experience or something and they just that's a blip on their radar of something strange that happens. So for me, it was sort of trying to figure out what the commonality was for why I kept experiencing all these strange things throughout my life. So I don't really have an answer for that. It's one of these great mysteries, but I do think there does seem to be a certain type of person that has these type of experiences throughout their life. And I have started doing some astrological research on that, just to try to like find out what is in people's charts that have those kind of recurring experiences with these bizarre kind of phenomena. I mean, I'm not even sure all of the experiences I had were necessarily what they were. You know, some of them, like when I was a 12, 13-year age, I was finding myself outside of my house in my pajamas and stuff, you know, trying to get back in my house. You know, there was stuff coming into my room, trying to pull me out of my body. There was a lot of really weird stuff going on. And I've had experiences like that throughout my lifetime. But it's not all the time. There seems to be cycles of it where it's really intensive. And right before I moved here, there was another intensive period where, like, for example, I paint. So I was in my studio making a painting, and I know physically how long it takes to make a painting. I've been doing it like since I was like 13 or 14 years old. And at that time I was in my 40s. So, you know, I'd be working. I would think it was like an hour had gone by because I had made this painting, and I'd look at my watch and only be like 3 minutes had passed. And I'm like, how is that even possible? You know, it didn't make any sense. And I had never heard of in the UFO phenomenon at that time, because again, I wasn't researching it. I just was experiencing these things. But as I came here and became really involved in MUFON, I realized that is one of the symptoms, or one of the things that a lot of experiencers have, is not just missing time, but accelerated time. And that I don't really understand exactly. So there's a lot of unanswered questions in that. I mean, I'm pretty rational, logical person, so I don't really talk about a lot of these experiences publicly, because, you know, I'm already weird enough as it is being a psychic. But I thought, you know, this would be a good place to talk about that with you guys, because I know you guys are kind of interested in that as well. As you know, I know you're both kind of fascinated by that. As,
well, now
besides the psychic stuff.
Denise, you say that you know, these experiences at time, you know, run in cycles. Do you think that these cycles are internal or external?
That's a good. I think, you know what, I think they may be kind of internal, because big periods of time. I think they're both. I mean, I think some of them are. I feel like the things that happened to me when I was a child were sort of setting me up to sort of be kind of conditioned to deal with them. And I think I have my theories about why that is, but they definitely intensified around the time of puberty, which I know is a period of time where that kind of thing happens a lot. You know, your body's changing, your hormones are shifting. And then they happened it really intensified right before I got pregnant with my daughter. And then I ended up, right after she was born, it intensified. So it was from that period right before till after. And it wasn't just the UFOs. There was all kinds of other weird stuff going on besides the acceleration of time. There was my father, who died when I was 10, started appearing to me. And I was never really somebody who saw ghosts, really. I mean, I was psychic, but wasn't really my thing. But that started happening really intensely. And it was like a period of time where it was like, again, like a weird, like almost like a vibrational shift or something like that happened to me during these periods of time. And then it sort of settles down and you're kind of normalized again. And then it kind of starts up. So I don't know exactly. I mean, I think it's interesting that it corresponded with, you know, my puberty and then with her right before she was born. So I don't know. I mean,
and anything to do astrologically? Could it have something to do with it?
I did actually look at a chart where actually my entire family, me, my husband, and my daughter also saw a UFO on January 1st this year, driving home from some friends, having coffee with them, right in our town. And I did look at that chart of that day. And actually there was stuff going on in everyone's chart that day that kind of indicated there would be some kind of unusual thing. I think it's like when there's a Uranus or Pluto aspect that's really strong. If you have that kind of, I think it's what I've seen is that there's often a Uranus-Pluto thing going on in people who are experiencers. There seems to be like a conjunction, and then there's like an opposition. Or really strong kind of planetary placements of those planets. And I think when those things are triggered by different planetary things, I think that's possibly one of the things. I don't know, because these things are so strange that I have to really kind of do more research astrologically to see if there's how much of a correspondence there really is. Because obviously, you know, for example, I was born on February 9th, 1967, and my best friend during the period of time when I was having all these strange experiences was actually born on my same exact birthday, which is really weird, the same year. And I was having these experiences. She was not. So that's, do you know what I mean? If it's astrology, if it's just about your birth chart, even though it should have, she was involved in it. She was.
All right, Denise, I'm going to have to
seriously.
interrupt you here because
Sure.
we have to go to our top
Sure.
of the hour break. When we come back,
Okay.
more Exploring the Bizarre. So stay tuned.
Exploring the bizarre. Your e-ticket ride into the world of the paranormal. Strap yourself in as we traverse the universe, exploring the unexplained. UFOs, ghosts, lost worlds, cryptozoology, as well as other dimensions. It's time to take back the night. Now, your electrifying hosts of Exploring the Bizarre, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
You know, Tim, I've always wondered, what are we going to do with the night since we've taken it back?
We have to share it equally with everyone.
Not another podcast. Then.
Well, no. See, we're sharing the night with everyone with Exploring the Bizarre.
Now I understand fully. Okay. Well, let's get back into our very fast-paced conversation. I must say, with two very excellent guests who really know their subject, and they're certainly educating and entertaining me. Now, Brian. Okay, where did we leave off?
We left off with this airplane crashing out of the sky, and June Ormond having a conversation with an angel on the wing, and having this bizarre, really existential conversation. And then just before the plane hits, this angel says to June Ormond, "But you're not going to die." They smashed into the ground. They kind of came in at a weird angle, and they caught a fence, which sort of slowed the plane, and it basically saved their lives. But also, Ron Ormond had been a flight trainer during World War II, so he knew what to do when a plane was crashing. But they were certainly going to die, so they all survived this crash, and as a result, they felt that. That God, because of this conversation that June Ormond had, they felt that God was calling them to become born again.
And okay, well, now they went from producing, you say, exploitation movies. What were some of the exploitation films that they did?
I know that one of my favorites is Wild Women of Wongo. That was one of the films that the Ormonds made.
It's not. Somebody else made Wild Women of Wongo.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But that might have been made by Trafco. Ron Ormond was making movies for Trafco for a while, and I think Trafco was the studio that produced Mace of Lost Women.
Mace of Lost Women. I'm sorry. That's the one that I was thinking of there. I love all those Lost Women types of movies.
Yeah, they're great.
I was going to say, I want to know where Wongo is so I can go there.
Wait, have you seen that movie, Bride of the Beast, where the couple are living in the jungle, and this lady begins to become infatuated with a white gorilla? I might be mixing up movies, but there's one where this woman runs off with a gorilla suit, basically. You think she's going to wind up with the guy at the end, but she winds up with the gorilla, and
a happy ending.
That film was written by Ed Wood, and he borrowed the gorilla suit from Ron and June Ormond, and he never returned it to them. So June Ormond held a grudge against him for the rest of her life. She refused to go see that Tim Burton movie, Ed Wood, because she was so angry that he'd stolen their gorilla suit.
Well, that couldn't. That couldn't have been, like cheap. It wasn't the best gorilla suit out there, but still, a full body gorilla suit back then, that had to have cost them some money.
Probably so. Yeah, I think so.
What was that? Was that really in the Peterson Bigfoot film? They just dyed the hair on it.
The one that the Planet of the Apes guy made.
Oh yeah,
John Chambers or somebody.
Yeah. Okay. What were some of the other? What were some of the other titles?
Well, anyway, the Ormonds, they stopped making exploitation movies after that. They made one last exploitation movie, which was their kind of biggest one, called The Exotic Ones, which was later retitled The Monster and the Stripper, and that's where
I gotta watch it. I bet you they're on YouTube. No?
You can find clips from Monster and the Stripper on YouTube. I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up on bynwr.com eventually. Although I don't know. But anyway, The Monster and the Stripper is about this Bigfoot type creature that is captured in the Okefenokee Swamp, and it's brought and put on display in a New Orleans strip club. And it ends up going berserk. Like when it gets captured, it tears this guy's arm off and beats him to death with it, and then attacks one of the strippers. And it's a pretty wild movie. But that was their last big exploitation movie.
That's a great plot. Well, they don't make movies like that anymore.
No.
Too bad.
So then after that, they began making Christian movies. They got hooked up with Mississippi Baptist preacher named Estes Perkle, who had been wanting to adapt a sermon of his into a film, but he didn't know anything about filmmaking, so somebody put him in touch with Ron Ormond, and that's how they began making these Christian movies. Now, the thing about the Christian movies that Ron Ormond made is that he had 20 years experience as an exploitation film director. So when he began making Christian movies, it isn't like his aesthetic changed. He kept basically making exploitation films. They look like exploitation films, and he knew how to really shock an audience. He knew how to do these gory scenes that could really shock people. And so it's funny because most Christians, frown on that kind of thing, or a lot of Christians don't care for like gory movies, horror movies, those type of things. My folks, when I was growing up, didn't like me watching horror movies. Anyway,
we can see that it really stunted your growth there.
Maybe it did. I'm pretty sure. The things that made Ron Ormond a successful exploitation director ended up being the same things that made his Christian movies successful. It was these shock gore scenes, but they were so shocking to viewers. The Christian films, when they were being screened, they were very successful at kind of scaring people into the church or back into church if they were kind of lax Christians. So they made this series of films. The first one is If Footmen Tire You, What Will Horses Do? And then the second one, The Burning Hell, which was the most successful one, which continues to be screened all over the world, really. And then they made one called The Believer's Heaven. And they had a falling out after that one, and Ron Ormond continued making Christian movies for a while until he died.
Where were these movies shown? Not in
they were shown in churches. So you mentioned earlier that you'd seen these really bad-looking movies, and the reason for that is because these Christian movies were only shown in churches.
Yes,
you could rent the Perkles would rent 16 millimeter prints of these films out to churches. So you had to be at church, and you had to make the screenings available to the public for free. And then they wanted people to send them reports of professions of faith after screenings of the films, because Estes Perkel wanted to keep a tally of how many people had been won to Christ, had been won to Jesus by at screenings of his films, and it got up into like
good mailing list.
I mean, they really like played all over the place, and those movies made millions of dollars. So his son Greg showed me the last count was like 8 million something professions following screenings of these movies. But when they originally screened, they were mostly playing through the Bible Belt. They played in a lot of Sunday school classes. So you find these like if you look these movies up on YouTube, you will only find very grainy bootlegs because those are the only versions that ever got out. You know, at some point in the 70s, somebody made video copies off of some prints. And
well, you know, wait, I bought the rights to a couple of them for $50 a piece.
You bought the rights?
Well, they're not. The copyright apparently had expired on this. Yes, there was a fellow whose name I can't remember offhand, and he had like all kinds of weird. I think it was weirdvideo.com or something like that.
Something
and he
weird?
would make it. Well, I can't remember. I think it was Weird Video, something like that. You know, weirdvideo.com, and he made a deal with a boatload of people that anybody could. In other words, you weren't buying exclusive rights to it. But for that $50, you could have the rights to make copies and sell them and so forth and so on. Now, the Ormond ones that I had, they were not good enough really to make copies because they jumped around a lot. You know, when you put the VHS in the and the
reason
player.
for that is because they were like third or fourth or fifth generation dubs.
Well, they were terrible, and that's why I probably never sold them. But you know, sold copies of them. But I had at one time 12 Go machines working, you know, like 10 hours a day, duplicating VHS tapes of all kinds of weird stuff, which I eventually put on DVD. But by that time, the bottom had kind of fallen out of the really sleazy. Well, I shouldn't say that. I can still sell a few. But you get the drift. I mean, there at one point, you know, other X-rated adult VHS tapes were going for $99, and you could buy a tape for me for you know, like $20 or something.
Right.
I still got VHS blanks. You know, in fact, VHS is making a comeback now. Don't laugh. I did a movie years ago called Thriller, which was the adult takeoff of Michael Jackson's Thriller.
Right.
And about 3 or 4 years ago, somebody came to me and said they were having a VHS convention, and they wanted to make up like 200 copies of a Thriller on VHS with the posters, and I had to autograph each one of them, and I guess they sold out. I got a little bit of a check for it, and so there is a VHS revival.
Yeah, you know, a pretty common thing nowadays is VHS flea markets. Here in Seattle, we have Scarecrow Video, which is the biggest video store in the world, and they have VHS flea market kind of thing about twice a year. I picked up a great Jack Van Impe video there one time. I was very pleased to find. But yeah, I mean, VHS is definitely, you know, there are documentaries about VHS, like specifically about VHS video collectors. There's like 2 documentaries about them. It's a big culture.
Well, I'm not big on not that there's much of a DVD culture, but I never liked them because they stuck and they froze and they skip and get scratched easy. And VHS was no great deal either. I mean, they had you know, the tapes would get. I think a couple of machines got destroyed because the tape got wound around, you know, something, and the master copies got all messed up, and you know, I had to send them out somewhere to have them like put together again, or unscrew the whole, you know.
They can get really gummy, and you have to bake them a certain way to get them not gum, and
I've got a whole bookcase full of VHS masters. I'm waiting for them really to come back. And I still got the Go machines, but I couldn't even operate them anymore. I wouldn't even know how to do that, to be honest with you. But we had them going day or night. Yeah.
The reason I got into these movies in the first place, back in the 90s, early 90s, when I was like freshman in high school, I used to sell Godzilla movies through the mail on VHS. I put an ad in Film Facts once, and I made a couple. I made over a year. I made maybe $300 or $400 just selling Godzilla movies. They were in the public domain at the time. It was before the GATT treaty, and I was looking around for the newest Godzilla movies. I found this place in Atlanta called Blast Off Video, and the owner, you could rent movies through the mail. And the owner took an interest in me because he had grown up in my hometown in Northern Virginia. So I would order stuff, and he would always throw something extra in. He'd go like, "You've seen this, now check this out. This isn't in your order, but you like this one." And one time he sent me this Ron Ormond film, The Grim Reaper. He was like, "You're gonna like this one, I think. It's not. It was his own personal like dub of it. It wasn't something they had in the store."
So push goes to shove.
Yeah.
You decided you want to do a documentary or a movie based on his career and his life. I take it. Now,
it's specifically about the Christian movies, and it's because they're fascinating. In a number of ways. I mean, Ron Ormond's story with the plane crash is fascinating. The more that I've worked with Estes Perkel's family and gotten to know them and learned about him, he comes across in those movies very one-dimensionally. And what I've come to find out is he was a big goofball. Like, he always had a big grin on his face. He liked to play practical jokes. And people really loved him. So it's interesting. There's just so many fascinating things about how these movies were made and the people who were involved. So it's been something I've wanted to do for almost 20 years, and now I'm kind of scraping the money together to go and shoot interviews here and there where I can. Although now that I'm filming stuff for by NWR, I travel around so much that I can kind of piggyback interviews for my documentary onto some of those trips. So it's been saving me a lot of money.
Now, we had like I mentioned before, the Varushka lady on about a month ago. Yeah. How do you tie in with that exactly? I mean, you really arranged her appearance.
We've been by NWR.com. It's mostly a showcase for these films that Nicholas has collected, because he collects film negatives, and he likes old exploitation movies. So he wanted to have this kind of place where he could, release the films, but without having to, put them out as physical media. So this website was kind of optimal because he's got like a mountain of films that he has to go through, So they're kind of being released a bit at a time each quarter. And
now, what is the website?
It's by NWR.com, and it's the website of filmmaker Nicholas Winding Refn. So the idea is, like, each quarter there are new films that he has had restored, new films from his collection that he's had restored that are going to be released and showcased. And there are writers, really amazing film and music writers who are curating the content for each quarter's release. And they're sort of writing articles that go along with the films, articles about specific people in them. And then we've been filming, people who are in some way involved in some of the films, usually performing in some way. So Beverly, the Babushka lady, is a singer, and she's a Christian ventriloquist.
A very interesting lady. I mean, what a great show we did, and it's doing very good on our YouTube channel. I mean, a lot of people are checking it out.
One thing that is great, and the video with her is available now on bynwr.com. What's really cool is that the first quarter stuff, it was all curated by Jimmy McDonough, who's an amazing writer. He wrote biography of Ross Meyer and Neil Young, and he had a biography of Al Green just came out last year. Jimmy put together that Beverly, the Babushka lady, who has had these releases, album releases, and she's got a film about her life, and also there are videos of her ventriloquist act. And she, worked at one of Jack Ruby's clubs. She was also the star of an old exploitation movie called Hot Blooded Woman. So when she's in it, I can't remember if she's the star, but nobody had really connected the dots that the same woman, like this woman in this film, the Babushka lady, this Christian ventriloquist, they were all three the same woman. So Jimmy wrote up an article about her and kind of her amazing life and all these things that she's done. And then we filmed her singing and doing some of her ventriloquist routine, and also talking about witnessing Kennedy's assassination, and all in 3D.
Wow, 3D.
Yep. Yeah, I've been shooting 3D for a while. Jimmy McDonough is a 3D photographer as well. He was he was taught how to shoot 3D photography by Lux Interior, the singer of the Cramps. They were friends. Anyway, when Jimmy was initially describing how he wanted me to be shooting stuff, one time he said, shoot it like 3D. And I went, well, Jimmy, I could shoot it in 3D. And he went, oh, yeah. So I've just been shooting everything in 3D since then.
And what other projects are you working on currently?
Well, I'm still filming. It's all kind of original content that is sort of included as these supplemental features to the film releases. So each quarter there are going to be new videos. So I'm spending a lot of time traveling and filming stuff for the website, and like I said, I'm kind of able to piggyback some interviews for my documentary onto these trips, which saves me a lot of money in travel expenses.
And Tim, you had a question. I know you wanted to.
I just wanted to ask what format are you shooting your documentary on? You say it's 3D. So
my documentary is not 3D. No.
Oh, okay.
It wouldn't make a lot of sense because the films that the documentary is about were not in 3D. It would be a little weird.
Okay. So
yeah, I'm just shooting 3D stuff for the website by nwr.com.
Okay, so then the Orman documentary, what kind of equipment are you using for that?
We had been using a GH4. We're shooting 4K. I'm not sure if I'm going to continue to use that. They keep better and better cameras.
Oh, I know. And what's the timeline? We got about a minute here before we have to go to our bottom of the break.
You mean?
Do you have a timeline? Yeah, for the finish.
Well, no. Really, what I'm doing at the moment is I'm getting the key interviews filmed, and then I'm going to begin to kind of piece together the skeleton of the documentary, and then do fundraising and get a production company behind it. It's just it's a difficult subject to kind of take around and sell an idea on without having something to show, what it's going to be like.
All right. Well, we need to go to our bottom of the hour break. So when we come back, more Exploring the Bizarre. Stay tuned.
Now back to Exploring the Bizarre with two of the most electrifying researchers in the paranormal, your hosts, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
All right, Tim, here we are at the final segment of Exploring the Bizarre. Always seems like when we get to this point, I just can't believe how fast the time has flown for the program. But Denise, I understand that you have put together some astrological charts exclusively for our show tonight?
Oh, well, yeah, I did. I mean, I did actually look at some stuff for, the Constitution signing chart, which is what I use for the United States. And kind of forecasting things that are going to happen in the country.
Mhm.
So yeah, I did actually do that.
Yeah.
I can tell you a little bit about that.
Definitely.
Yeah, so basically right now, this is a weird segment to go from exploitation films to astrology. This is really weird, but this is so bizarre. But okay, so anyway, so Pluto, which rules transformation, change, and all this stuff, is currently in the transit. It's transiting the 12th house of the United States, which I'm going to go into a little bit of something that. So there's a little bit of a thing among astrologers about what chart you should use when you talk about forecasting for the United States. And this is kind of maybe boring to some people, but there's the Declaration of Independence, which we celebrate July 4th. And then there was the Articles of Confederation. And then we had the Constitution. And the thing is, our country really didn't become our country with our government set up and everything until the Constitution was signed. And so, I use the Constitution signing chart to be able to kind of determine what's going to happen, because I find that that's the most accurate. You look at the Independence Day chart, and it doesn't really tell you much of anything about what we're actually going through or dealing with. But basically, what Pluto transiting the 12th house means is that stuff is going to be kind of boiling under the surface, which we've had for a while. The whole thing with the Russia stuff the sort of subversion, and the 12th house is basically things hidden enemies. I wouldn't be surprised. Already there's been talk about there being election kind of fraud and problems with our system that have been happening in Florida and other places. There's like some tampering going on right now. That's this Pluto transit, and I am kind of worried that because of this transit that we're not going to get that under control. Let me go back to my chart here, because it's a little that, as well as I saw some bad aspects basically going on with Neptune in the first house of the U.S. Constitution chart, which means that basically people are confused. People are not really in their right minds. They're not really thinking very clearly right now in our country. And it's speaking in opposition to Mercury in Virgo in the 7th, which is our legal system and our media outlets, communication. So there's a disconnect. There's a problem between our ability to think clearly, and there's a lot of nefarious kind of things in the U.S. Constitution chart that are transiting, that are showing up in the chart of the United States. And stuff that I looked at for Donald Trump, even how his chart sort of fits into what's going on with our country. Let me look at my notes here, because there's a lot. So Trump's Jupiter is exactly conjunct the natal Neptune of the U.S. Constitution signing chart, which means that all the sort of Neptunian things, which are people's belief systems, and what Neptune rules is basically not just belief systems, but trickery and delusion. It's spirituality, but in the case of this, it's much more about delusion and sort of feelings of being lost and kind of directionless. So that's happening. His chart also has Pluto conjunct the descendant of the 7th house, which is the house of the legal, the laws of the land. And Pluto is sort of a blowing up kind of plutonium. Think of plutonium like explosive. The 7th house being our legal system. Those are not really great. I think we're seeing kind of the resonance with that in sort of the things that are going down with the Mueller investigation. My feeling is here is what I sort of talk about in the book in terms of his chart, Donald Trump, is there's a confluence of a lot of really bad aspects going on in his chart that basically kind of started in the spring of this year. And we started seeing some of the stuff kind of come apart for him then, and the sort of all these investigations that are kind of coming to the fore. The Mueller investigation is now like, his Manafort is on trial right now. All this stuff that's coming out, it builds up over the next year, and it looks like really it's not till the spring of next year when all these aspects are really tight on him. And I could get really technical, but I think that's kind of boring for people to listen to. But basically, the general feeling of it is that in the U.S. Constitution chart and in his chart, there's resonance with the spring of next year where things kind of come out. And I think right now, as Uranus is right on the cusp of the third house, and that means basically stuff is kind of coming out in the media. People are finding out stuff that they had no idea or didn't know about. It's going to go backwards into the second house. And when it was in the second house before, there was we've had some instability in the marketplace that kind of showed up in February. That may kind of start to happen again in the fall with the Dow Jones and the NASDAQ and all that, as Uranus starts to transit back into the second house and starts making bad aspects as well, because naturally also the Neptune point in the chart of the stock market is actually in Libra. So there's a lot. I feel like I'm getting a really kind of too astrology for you guys, but basically, the next year is going to be a very kind of time where I think that a lot of this stuff that's under the surface now kind of comes out, and we learn a lot of information, and it all kind of culminates next spring. And I think in the meantime, it could kind of do damage to some of our systems, our economic systems, as it moves, as there's some very bad conjunctions that start to happen around February, March of next year and get worse as time goes on. So that's my little warning kind of breakdown of where we're headed here with all this stuff. I don't know what to say else other than that, but there you go.
So you think that a couple of months after the 2018 election inaugurations happen is when there's going to be a lot of pressure on Donald Trump?
I think so. I think actually when I looked at some resonant points with some of the charts of people that had been impeached before, it was pretty much always like there's some aspects in December of this year actually that kind of show that could be something that's talked about or like that starts to kind of bubble under the surface around that period of time. I'm not really sure how he gets into trouble exactly, because these aspects are really kind of more, they're kind of worse than impeachment, really. They're kind of like aspects you would see in a criminal kind of situation, or an indictment kind of situation, or something a lot worse than just, like a Nixon kind of impeachment type of scenario, So I kind of think that impeachment may be bandied about after maybe the midterms, and maybe people will start really more seriously taking that into account. But I'm not sure if that's what's going to happen to him, or if it's going to be something weirder than that, because he's got a very strong Uranus-Sun conjunction and opposing his moon, and everything that happens to him is really unexpected. He himself is really kind of erratic, but sort of when you think you pin him down, then he kind of finds a way to bounce out of it, and it's because of that Uranus-Sun conjunction. And so you always have to kind of expect the unexpected with him. So I don't know if it's going to be a traditional sort of impeachment scenario with him. I think it may be something a lot weirder than that kind of comes down the pike. I'd had kind of inklings that maybe it was more like a deal was struck, that he ends up, the evidence is presented to him that he's in really deep trouble and that he maybe will resign, which doesn't make sense to me because he's not the type of person that resigns. But I guess if they took off something, something off the table, like a worse crime or something that gets kind of unearthed through this process, then maybe he would be willing to kind of give up the presidency to get out of deeper trouble. I think it's going to be something we don't quite expect, and I don't think it's going to be in the historical kind of paradigm that we've seen with other presidents and them being in trouble. I think it's going to be slightly different than that. There's a lot of just, he's just so very Uranian, and this whole thing with Pluto going through the 12th house is really, it really implies the stuff with Russia and the sort of the dark side, kind of almost like a mafia type of vibe, that's sort of, our hidden enemies are really powerful and dark and hidden from us, and they're trying to do damage to our country. So we'll see what happens there. Hopefully, we'll expose it as Pluto transits, but it's going to be there for a while. So, you know, you never know exactly how these things are going to play out. But I think I have to say the Neptune thing is the thing that's most concerning to me, that people seem to be unable to decipher truth from fiction right now. And this is really kind of a global problem with Neptune and Pisces, but in some of our progressed chart in the United States, there's a lot of bad Neptune aspects. So I think the hardest thing is going to be able to see what's real from what's not real in the situation, and kind of a lot of like confusion about what's going on. I think that's my main concern, really, in terms of how this plays out, and knowing exactly how it will play out, because it's really going to be up to us to kind of sort through all this information to be able to put it into perspective so that we can be clear about it. But right now there's not a lot of clarity. So I think whatever happens, a lot of stuff will come out, but I think a lot of stuff will be hidden from us too. A lot of what they uncover about this, I don't think will come out until many years later. I think until Pluto.
Have you done anything on the midterm elections?
You know, I have not yet. I have done a little bit. I have looked at Donald Trump's chart during the midterm elections, and that looks like he's going to be very unhappy. So I think that to me was, I did some earlier on, and there's a couple of things. There's a transit going on for the Republicans, which is like a Pluto thing, which is basically a big change that they're going through. And then the Democrats have a lot of Neptune stuff going on, which means they're very confused and they're kind of leaderless, which is we've seen. I have always had the suspicion from early on that the midterms would be like, it would be a blue wave. There'd be a lot of, seats that would turn over and everything and go blue. But, I started getting a little worried with this stuff coming up that Russia is sort of targeting different places and trying to kind of insert themselves into the process. But I did look at Trump's chart, and he has some aspects that make it look like he's not a happy camper during that period of time. So I felt like that was probably a good indicator that my intuition about that was right. So I'll have to look more and really determine, honestly, like really look at Putin's chart, and I haven't really looked at Putin's chart in a while since I was doing the book. I did look at Putin's chart a long time ago and try to figure out what he was all about. What I found out about him was it was kind of scary. His chart was kind of a little bit scary, actually. And there was definitely markers of like a very cold, kind of calculated, extremely intelligent, and somebody who thinks like 30 steps ahead type of person, which is great for them, but not so great for us. So compare that to Donald Trump, who's so erratic and all over the place. It's really easy to see how he could manipulate situations. Somebody who's so calculating, and he's like a master chess player. He's got some very cold kind of, very kind of cold, almost sociopathic kind of stuff in his chart. So I don't think that and Donald Trump is got that too, but he's so erratic and sort of so narcissistic. His chart is so very explosive, internal, and kind of self-absorbed that he's not really a chess player. He's sort of living in the moment, constantly just sort of, throwing stuff out there, whatever works, kind of like a man who's drowning and just kind of throwing stuff around, trying to figure out how to get out of the next situation. So he's not thinking far enough ahead. And I think this is sort of a bit of the problem we're in right now. That's, as good of an assessment as I could give that, really.
Well, now, when you talked about going through a period where we don't know what's going on, and there's a lack of information, but I can imagine that when you put this kind of information out on YouTube, that you're going to get a lot of people who, because you're not talking in just absolute glowing terms, about the situation.
Right. Oh yeah.
I mean, you're just going to get viciously attacked.
Oh yes, I do. I do. Yes, I do. I really do. Yes, and the people that are Trump supporters are really, they're like fanatical. Of course, there's a lot of people that are not Trump supporters. I think the majority of people probably are kind of not really on board with a lot of things going on, but the people that support him are really supporting him, and like almost like a very Neptunian kind of like very sort of giving themselves over in a sort of ecstatic kind of emotional and they don't really know the actual facts kind of way.
It's like a cult.
Yeah, I get a lot of like a cult, exactly like a cult, and I definitely get attacked, and I just don't even read any of the comments because, I mean, I've heard, people damning me to hell and all kinds of stuff. So I just try to stay out of it. I'm like, I can't. What can I say? This is what I see, and I can't. What can I tell you? I know I'm going to piss people off for sure. Yeah.
Well, that aspect has been fascinating to me, because going back to like, some of the stuff that Brian was talking about, with the evangelicals and their films, it's like this whole aspect of this current support, that there's almost a religious aspect that God has chosen this to happen and we shouldn't stand in the way.
That's so true, and I live in the South now, and I really did not understand it until I lived here, and I've met people here, and how closely associated they are with the church, and how the church has really inserted itself into politics in a way that I don't think it's been growing, I think. I think because I lived on the coast for so long, I didn't really realize how really deeply connected those two things were, and how people really, it really is sort of, they've merged the politics and it's very much like a theocratic kind of, there are shades of, like fundamental, like really kind of crazy fundamentalism that sort of mirrors a lot of the stuff, the jihad kind of stuff, it's not quite to that extreme yet, but you start to wonder if it's going to go there, because it's almost like some people want to live in a theocracy. They don't really want to live in a democracy. And I don't know how you really, that's this Neptune transit too, though, this Neptune in Pisces. It's like those people feel empowered to, I've heard people talking about the return of Jesus and stuff like that in public spaces, and they really believe that. And that's, I understand what, that's their faith and everything, but I think they really see Trump as connected to that somehow. And I think that's why people are so emotional about this, and it's so irrational, and they're not really looking at who he is and what he represents and the things that he does, because they're so invested in this other paradigm and this thing happening, and they see him as a vehicle for it. So it's a very, I think it's a very precarious place we're in with some of those people, because I think even when this all comes down with Trump, I don't think those people are just going to go back in their box. You know what I mean? And it's going to be I think we're divided now, but imagine when something like that happens, how divisive that will be to the people that had their heart set on this idea of him sort of emancipating whatever. I don't really understand exactly how they believe he's going to be bringing on this, but I think they really have tied him to the blood moon stuff, and a lot of religious ideas, and a lot of those religious fundamentalist people have kind of put their energy behind him. And it's sort of, I think it's something that goes back really I remember from really the Reagan years started kind of creeping in there with the religious people and the right wing kind of being intertwined with the Republican Party, and it's just gotten more and more entrenched and just become more aligned. So they've become almost like one ball, you know what I mean? And
well, also,
I don't.
We live in a time when people can choose news networks that validate their own belief system. Right. So people can choose. People can choose to believe in whatever kind of reality they want to based on the news networks that they choose to watch.
Yeah, no, you're right.
right.
The news never used to be like that before. It wasn't. And is the news managed? Well, that's an interesting. We know that the CIA has been involved in leading or asking networks to do certain things, like cover up UFOs, for example. So, the news isn't like the news used to be. You turned on Walter Cronkite, and there were 20 stories for the day. And now, if you just want to hear about Donald Trump, you got your Fox network. If you want to hear stuff that's anti-Trump, you got the NBC, and you tune into what? Well, it's not that far different than the UFO or paranormal. I see that happening in the UFO field. You follow the individual who confirms what your belief system is, rather than actually looking for what the truth of the matter may be. It's like if you're into abductions or think you've been abducted, you go out and you find an abduction a researcher who will verify your claims and hypnotize you and make you tell the story, or have you tell the story that is in your subconscious already. If you're into the MIB and you've been silenced or think you've been silenced, you're either going to come to me or Nick Redford, because you're going to get a sympathetic ear. And if you're into nuts and bolts and don't want to hear about anything below treetop level, you'll go to, pardon, I should say this, MUFON.
All right. Tim, guys, I'm going to have to interrupt you here because we've got about 2 minutes left of the show, and I want to give our guests a chance to let our audience know where they can find out more about them. Denise, let's start with you.
Okay, you can go to my website, denisesiegelpsychic.weebly.com, or you can go to my blog, astrologyandpsychicpredictions.wordpress.com, or you can go to my YouTube channel. It's just Denise Siegel. You just type it in there, and you'll find me.
All right, excellent. And Brian, what about you?
I don't have a website personally. I'm on Facebook, but check out bynwr.com. It's spelled out bynwr.com. You can see a bunch of my work on there if you have to hunt around for it. And if you have VR viewer, you can see it all in 3D. And earlier I said Mesa of Lost Women was Trafco Studios. I meant Halco.
All right, fantastic. And Tim, what do we got coming up?
Well, man, we've got more things than you can shake a stick at, so shake that stick. We're working on this. We're working on this book. I don't want to give away the title, but it has to do with sex.
Sex in the UFO.
A lot more than that.
All right.
Indeed.
All right, everyone. Thanks for listening.
Don't forget our YouTube channel, Mr. UFO's Secret Files.
You've been listening to Exploring the Bizarre with hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz. They're taking back the night by jetting non-stop across the cosmos in search of the truly bizarre and totally unexplained, with you as their co-pilot. Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. For more information on Exploring the Bizarre and hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz, check out their KCOR Digital Radio Network page. Follow their YouTube channel at MRUFO 1100. Exploring the Bizarre.